This episode is sponsored by no one. Insert your company name here. If you would have an interest in becoming a sponsor of the Golf Guru Show, please send me a proposal email to golfgurushow@gmail.com and I will review it. I am looking for company sponsors that share the same passion for success, continuous learning genes, and sharing qualities that I have and would love to partner with a company with these values. If you want to be a part of this project, feel free to contact me today. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Golf Guru Show. I am your host, Jason Sutton, aka The Guru, where it is my mission to tease out the habits, life lessons, secrets to success, find out all the books these guys are reading, all the things they're doing to make themselves successful, as well as all the technical teaching and coaching ideas that you can apply to your career and your life immediately to help you to achieve better results for your students and better results from your life. Huge gratitude to all the high performers that have been on this show thus far. Thank you so much for your willingness to share your knowledge and expertise with all of you kind listeners out there. And thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for supporting the podcast. On this episode, I have my good friend Sean Kennedy. Sean is the Director of Instruction at The Cliffs. For those of you that don't know about this place, The Cliffs is a collection of 7 private, luxurious residential mountain and lake club communities that spreads over 20,000 acres in the Blue Ridge Mountains. It's a phenomenal place. We just got to teach together last weekend. We did a 2-day school at Walnut Cove, which is one of the facilities, which is fantastic. I'm excited to see the other 6 at some point and maybe go play a little golf. But me and Sean have been friends for a couple of years and really got to know each other through the section as he's become more well known as one of the best teachers in our section and one of the smartest guys that I've ever met. So I was really excited to have him on the podcast. So we dive into a variety of subjects, which include all of his diverse interests that he's gathered throughout his career and sort of early childhood and college, which include playing in a punk band, skateboarding, being a chemist in grad school, which shows his diversity and his wit, and is really just one of the most interesting guys that I've ever met, and really excited to share with you guys this conversation with my friend Sean Kennedy. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to this conversation with my friend Sean. Enjoy. All right, Sean Kennedy, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. It's good to have you on, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, I appreciate you asking me. You've had quite a great list so far, so it's nice to be included on that list.
Well, I've been wanting to have you on for quite some time, but I knew that we had this 2-day school scheduled where we were going to teach together, so I thought we were going to do it then, but we were so busy and just didn't have the time to get it in as we were face-to-face. So it's been, 48 hours since I've seen you, and I miss you already.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming up and doing that too. I've got already gotten a lot of nice feedback.
Well, that's good. Yeah, it was fun, and it was even, like I said, it was even more fun to kind of get to know you better, and we've known each other for several years, but there's nothing like teaching together and then spending time together, having dinner and hanging out at the house, and got to know a little bit more about your story, which I'm excited for the listeners to get to hear as well. I'm going to affectionately coin you as the most interesting person in the world in the golf instruction business.
No. I think, there's people in our section that are way more interesting than me.
I don't know. I think if we dig into everything that we dug into this weekend, I think there may be, it's not even going to be a fair fight.
Yeah, I just have a lot of interest. That's all. I'm just interested in a lot of stuff.
Well, it's cool because I mean you're still a young guy, but I feel like you've lived such a full life, and you've gotten to do so many cool things and visited places and had multiple careers and interests. So, take us back to your childhood. Like, where did you grow up, and then sort of how did it all begin?
Well, I'm a Midwestern guy. I was born in Illinois, and then we moved to Wisconsin in my formative years. So all the things that are Wisconsin, like the Packers and cheese and dairy products are, many of my favorite things. Played golf in high school, wanted to play hockey. Like, I got hurt a lot playing hockey. So my mom convinced me that golf was a better way for me to go, and got lucky enough to play in college in South Carolina at the College of Charleston. And we were NAIA school when I started. And, our team I was lucky to be playing with a bunch of other good golfers, and we made it to nationals. And I played in Michigan on the windiest golf course, I think, that I've ever played on 2 years in a row, but it was a lot of fun. And then from then I thought I was going to be a professional chemist. That's what I thought I was going to do. I was going to go to grad school, get a PhD, and, make a lot of money, like a lot of the people that I teach now, actually.
Right.
And so I tried that, and the guy who was running my little research project.
Yeah. So give us a little more detail there. So you went to work for a pretty big company and got a nice opportunity, right, to go to grad school and get it paid for. So give me a little bit more detail, because I think it was
there was this co-opting program with this huge pharmaceutical company, GSK. I think it's Glaxo Wellcome now. I think that's what it's called. Part of the deal was, as you were going up, you got attached to this team of researchers, and like you kind of work your way in, and they're kind of like your mentors too. They would help you through the process of, getting your degree. So I got on this team. We were working on blood proteins. It was pretty cool stuff. I was pretty excited to be doing that right out of college. And I had the real easy job. So they would build it, and then I would just tell them why it wouldn't work. Oh, that bond sucks, so you got to go figure that out. And we were, I don't know. I mean, that was kind of it. Blood proteins. That's all like anybody ever talked about.
Your inner geek. Is that where it started?
There was a company golf tournament that was held. And, so each department kind of played on a team, and the team that I was on was traditionally not very good. And then we ended up winning the event. So I got introduced to the other side of the business pretty quickly, where they're like, okay, well, here's a young guy who has a deep understanding of the product because he's on a team that's making the stuff. So let's get him into sales. And so I was like, wow, man, I have job offers. Called my parents, and
when you shoot, you're skipping over so much of the cool stuff. When you shoot 61, right? You shot 61. I mean, that kind of helped, right?
Well, yeah, it was like 6,000 yards, and no, I did. I played very nicely, and it was a shock to the I guess the other side of the corporate structure that the chemistry geeks were like playing golf. So yeah, I mean, obviously golf is tied into like everything that kind of happened to me in my career. So yeah, toyed with that idea, and then, going to school and thinking about it. The guy who led our research team, he told me, he just flat out told me one day, he's like, Sean, I don't think you have what it takes to be where I am. I was like, what do you mean? You don't think I can get my PhD? He's like, well, I think you can get it, but I think you have too many other things that you're interested in. He's like, look around you in the lab, the guys that you're working with. Do you hang out with them socially? I was like, well, yeah, we've gone out and I was like, well, what do you talk about? I was like, we talk about work. It's like, oh, okay. And he's like, but what would you rather talk about? And I was like, oh, movies, books, bands, right. Pop culture kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, he's like, really, they're not particularly interested in that kind of stuff. They're interested in what we're doing, and that's kind of it. And so I wanted to prove him wrong. And I was like, okay. And there's well, you know where it is, ECU.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yep.
So you know where it is. And it's
biggest party school.
Right. There's a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah,
you know?
it's busy.
So, I found a place where there's a band playing. It's a band from North Carolina that I really like called the Canals. So I was like, all right, pretty excited. So I said, got a bunch of tickets and went back, and I said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go out and see this band. Everybody's like, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, let's go do that. Hang out. So we all got there. We got a table, sitting around, drinking beer. Band starts playing. So I was like, I'm going to go up check the band out. I go up there, and the place is, crawling with young, attractive people.
Right.
And,
and what are your friends doing?
We're all young, attractive people, but we're not. So, I'm hanging out. The band takes a little set break. 45, 50 minutes have passed. I walked back to the table, and the guys are sitting right where they were. Nobody got up to get another round of beers or anything, and they are talking about work. On the napkins, they're drawing protein structures.
Oh, no.
And then so I come back, and then they started asking me questions about the structure, and I was just like, oh yeah. And then
then it hit you.
Right. That was it. And I went in and I told, I was like, Doc, yeah, you're right. I was like, I saw it last night, and I don't have what it takes to do this. So I called my mom and dad and told them I was dropping out, and my mom was like, oh, you're going to take the sales job? I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. She's like, what are you going to do? And I was like, well, I think I'm going to go to Canada and try to play professional golf. Like, they have a Q school. I'm going to go do that. And silence on the other side.
Mom wasn't a big supporter, right?
Right.
Initially.
So then my father picks up the phone. He's like, well, what'd you say to her? And I was like, well, I'm dropping out of grad school, and I'm going to British Columbia, and I'm going to go try to qualify for the Canadian tour. And my dad's like, all right, cool.
Well, there you go. You got 1 out of 2.
Yeah. So, yeah, I did that, went up there, played really well, and, qualified and traveled eastward across Canada all summer long. It was pretty neat.
Was this before or after you were in your punk rock band?
Oh, well, yeah, no, I was in the band thing was in college.
Yeah, so you got to tell us about that, because I think that's we share a little bit of a common thread with some of our music that we listen to, and I'm really interested in that part of your life too.
All right.
You may not want to talk about all of it, but I think it's just cool to know like how good you guys got. It like just give us a little snippet of that story.
Yeah, well, and it's being in the right place at the right time, and just that's like a lot of things. We were in the right place at the right time, doing something that nobody else was kind of doing at that time. And so it's based. I mean, the real master of the band is a guy named Smith Riley. I mean, he was the master of the band. So he was the guy who did all the MIDI stuff, programmed all the drums, right? Played keyboard. So he was like when I wasn't playing bass, he was the bass player. I mean, he did kind of everything. Like, so he was the mastermind. And he had this vision, that we all liked hip hop and we all liked punk rock. I mean, those were like the three of us, and our main guitar player, he really liked blues, like
it's a
Robert
good combination.
Johnson. Yeah. I mean, there's a huge blues influence. And, we started hanging out. We were all undergrad, chemistry geeks. So we hung out a lot, same classes all the time. I didn't necessarily hang out with the golf team very much. I was hanging out mostly with these guys. And, Gordon had a guitar, the guy who was into the blues, Gordon Luke. And, was just noodling on a guitar. And I had a bass guitar that I had gotten in high school. I don't even know why I had gotten it. I guess I asked my parents for it, and they usually got me whatever I asked for most of the time. And, so I was like, hey, I got a bass guitar. And he's like, oh, yeah, man, he's like, you have an amp? I was like, no, just got a bass guitar, though. He's like, okay, well, that's interesting. So, would bring it over to his him and Smith lived together, their apartment, and noodle around on it. And, Smith would like noodle on the bongos, and then he got his first like chord keyboard, and then he started messing with like, do you know what a Leslie speaker is? That's in like a Hammond organ.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Not
well,
big,
anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, you can tell Smith. You can hear Smith's genius.
Alan Burton,
anyway.
I'm sure, will know what that
right.
is.
And all this, like, because Smith would like, he was an electronics genius too. Like, so he would like pull apart stuff and build stuff. I mean,
Oh my
it was
gosh.
amazing. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, like I said, he was the mastermind. And like I said, I'm in the right place at the right time because, like, okay, we all kind of like the same kind of stuff, and so we started making music. And Smith's dad had this farm in north of Charleston. I guess it was like 30 miles outside of Charleston. And we would go up there and we would just, play music. And then Smith's like, well, we should record some of this stuff. I think it's pretty good. And he's like, all right. So, we got some 4-track. Now I'm really dating myself.
Yeah,
4-track recordings,
okay.
Right? Making 4-track recordings, all pre-digital. And, then Smith would like remix it through a set. I mean, it was crazy. Like,
way before your time, right?
In, right.
Yeah.
But what he was doing, and it was, and I was like, damn, this, it sounds pretty good. No live drummer, right? And we got a guy who's
drum machine,
blues influenced on like lead guitar, and I'm rhythm, so I play bass and I play guitar.
You're singing too, right?
Right. Yeah. Yes.
Or screaming,
singing, screaming, venting, ranting, trying to rhyme.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Who were some of your influences? I know we
Doing
talked a lot. We talked some about hip hop, but who were, like, I know Beastie Boys were kind of,
oh yeah, the Beastie Boys were a huge deal for me.
Punk. Yeah. Who else were
Yeah.
some of your influences?
I mean, because they were like a punk band, and then they became this hip hop annoyance thing, and then they became kind of like cool hip hop, and then they kind of, so yeah, the Beastie Boys were a huge deal for me developmentally as a young person. All the like the 80s hardcore scene in Wisconsin, there were 2 bands. D. Croizen was like, probably the, corrosion of conform. Well, you're not from North Carolina, you're from West Virginia.
Right.
So I was thinking of the North Carolina punk rock band. That was Corrosion of Conformity. But that was like kind of the Wisconsin punk rock band. And then all the New York scene, the West Coast scene, like with Suicidal Tendencies and Black Flag and
I've heard
all
of them.
that stuff. Yeah. I never got
Flaming Lips.
well, Flaming Lips were,
not quite as punky, but I guess.
Yeah, they were the punks who were taking acid. They were like, so they were very influential to me in my development, musically too.
Sure.
Because they definitely took punk and turned it on its ear. Like the Butthole Surfers to me were, when I got in the band, that's what when they were at Smith and Gordon were asking me about the music that I like. And I basically said, well, yeah, I want to be like the Butthole Surfers. And they're like, okay. So they had an idea where I was coming from.
There you go.
Which is, it's loud, it's psychedelic, it's dissonant,
Yes.
and then it's melodic sometimes too. So it's, it's just all over the place.
Yeah, I love it. And then you were also into skateboarding as well, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that before we get back into your golfing career stuff.
that was my motive, suburban white punk. Grew up in suburbia. That was my mode of transportation. That or, BMX bike, I guess, was the other one. But yeah, that was my mode of transportation. And then when I went to the College of Charleston, it was interesting to me because like there was no skaters. And then I started to understand because of the streets were like there's cobblestone and brick.
Right.
And especially at the main quad at the College of Charleston, it's all like cobblestone and brick. So yeah, it was tough
not real easy to motivate a skateboard.
Yeah, it wasn't like skater territory. So, but I got pretty good at like basic stuff. And, like I said, I had a lot of interest. So yeah, in high school, I had no idea what I was going to do in college. I told my parents, I was like, I'm just going to go be a pro skater. And both my parents laughed at that idea. And, I'm pretty pragmatic. So, when they both laugh at you, you're like, okay, well, that's really a bad idea.
Uh,
If one of them just laughs at you, you're like, okay, well, maybe it's not that horrible an idea. And I thought, we were talking about movies when you and I were hanging out.
Yeah.
I thought I could go to film school.
Yeah, I like that idea. That's what I would have probably done if I didn't go teach golf.
Yeah. I could, at that time, I could definitely see myself, making like the next Blade Runner or something like that. That was going to be me.
I love it.
I think dreams, right?
Absolutely. And I think,
being pragmatic, I knew I was good at math and chemistry, and and I was interested in that stuff. And even then, I still, wanted to attack that, part of me.
Yeah, which it sort of leads into how you teach golf and all the research and just the way you approach it. I think is interesting. Right?
It's like everything. I'm all over the place. Yeah.
Right, and it's okay. I think that's what makes us great, though. It's like you figure out a lot of different solutions to the same problem, and because we're not teaching people that act the same way or behave the same way or have the same tendencies. So it's just the way it is.
The way humans move is a pretty complex deal.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So lead us off from, so you go to Q school, you're playing in Canada, doing okay, and sort of take us from there to how you got to where you are now.
So when I've listened to a lot of these podcasts, this is a very similar story, right? Well, I want to play. You go out there, you try to play, and you realize that, okay, well, first of all, people are way better than you are. That's like the first thing that you realize. And they're like working a lot harder at it than you are. That's like the second thing that you realize, like the drive. So the same thing that I saw in the professional chemistry, I saw it in professional golf. I was like, man, I don't know if I have that kind of drive for that.
Right.
To do what it takes to get to that level. You're good enough to somehow luckily get into play there, and then you realize like, oh crud. So that week that I had that was really good, I got to do that like every time. I got to like show up and
for a long time.
Right. Yeah. I got to make 6 birdies kind of like every time I show up. Because sometimes I'm going to have some, bogeys and others, and sometimes maybe I won't. I'll just make 6 birdies, and it'll be a nice number. But yeah, no, those guys are doing it all the time. And then you watch them play, and there's like, man, I mishit it a lot, and these guys don't sound like they're mishitting it as often as I am. All right, okay, well, so I didn't have that kind of drive. And my caddy, he's like, you're very interested in how these guys get it done. We talk about it all the time. You're like, yeah, look at that guy. His grip's all fucked up, and he hits this.
Right.
he can still hit this high, like, straightest shot. How does he do that?
So you were thinking more like a coach or a teacher than the player.
Yeah, and he's to my caddy's annoyance. He's like, you just need to do you, man. He's like, you're watching everybody you're playing with and asking me all these damn questions. He's like, you just need to do you. So he told me, he's like, you should go think about teaching golf. So I went back to Charleston, and Tommy Cuthbert, who was the director of golf at Kiowa Island. And I went and I sat and I told him what I wanted to do. And he's like, well, okay, we'll give you a job, but you're not going to start teaching golf. You're going to start where everybody starts. You're going to start in the bag room.
Right.
And at that time, Kiowa wasn't being a golf resort. It was a golf resort, but it wasn't what it is today.
Right.
It was pre Ryder Cup, so this was, they were building the ocean course and all, and all that stuff. I guess the Ryder Cup had just happened. Anyway, yeah. Sorry, timeline's bad.
It's okay.
But anyway, so now Kiowa is, becoming this, it's becoming a different thing than what it was. And there are still a bunch of members there. They have this thing called the Governor's Club. And, so we had like membership play kind of in the morning and the resort play more or less in the afternoon. And I worked the bag room there. Got to know the membership, and you could tell I like to talk, so it wasn't that hard for me to start understanding the relationship part of the golf business.
Right.
And so from then, he's like, okay, well, yeah, we got a spot for a second assistant position at one of the clubs, Osprey Point. He's like, would you like to take it? And I was working at, the club was Turtle Point that I started at.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah. And then Ronnie Miller was the head professional there. I don't know if you know Ronnie or not, but Ronnie still plays.
I don't.
He still plays in senior events. Okay. So Ronnie was a player, right? And, obviously I could play decent golf,
Yeah, you're a really good player even now.
I played 4 years at the College of Charleston and, scrambled my way to a bunch of missed cuts in professional golf for about 3 years. And Ronnie told me, because I told him what I wanted to do. And he's like, well, good, because people are going to want to take lessons from you because you can play. And I was like, well, I don't know anything about teaching. He's like, well, you need to learn how to teach. I was like, well, how do I do that? And he's like, I give golf lessons. Watch me give golf lessons. And then, you can ask me questions and stuff, why I did what I did and, what I think. So he was the first guy who talked to me about golf instruction.
Right. Your first mentor, your golf instruction mentor.
Right. And he's like, well, you took lessons before, right? And I was like, yeah, I've taken lessons. And he's like, well, who helps you the most? And in college, I took lessons from Mike Bender.
Right.
And he told me, he's like, well, call Mike and tell him, So I called Mike. I said, Mike, you remember me? He's like, oh, yeah, I remember you. I told him what I was doing. And he's like, yeah, come on down. He's like, you can sit and watch and, we'll hang out afterwards and, talk about it. And that was an amazing experience, right? Because he was teaching people at all skill sets.
Right.
And he was making them better fast. And that so that was pretty cool.
What jumped out at you there? Do you remember any specific lessons or anything that he told you?
Right. I mean, he was kind of like club face is a big deal. Every lesson, didn't matter if he was talking to an expert or a newer player. He just kind of got them to understand club face. And that was a big deal. And if they understood club face, it seemed like they could hit it better.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And he didn't call it low point, but he talked about low point.
Yeah. He was a big kind of MORAD guy, right? I mean, kind of stack and tilt MORAD.
Right.
Sort of morphed. Impact.
Impact was a big deal to him. Yep. Huge deal. Right. Again, I don't think he called it delivery. I don't think he used the P system either.
No, it was probably even before that, maybe.
Yeah.
For sure.
But yeah, so I mean, he made something complex pretty simple. Just kind of hey, the strike part, delivery, impact, follow through for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy he was fine tuning and refining. This is way before launch monitors or anything.
Right.
And it was amazing. I hope one day to have that skill set that he displayed, where I watched him for 3 days do what he does, and he's still doing it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I just saw him this past winter and still teaching great players and doing great things. Yeah,
amazing. And just amazing with his time with me. But again, at that time, there was no social media, everything that there is now for information delivery.
Sure.
So information delivery was more of kind of what you and I did last, over the weekend.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. So what did you go from there? How did that help you move forward?
Well, that just made, I would just say that when I got back to Kiowa, and I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but I definitely felt that, I was the best teacher.
Yeah. Dangerous place to be.
Yeah. And
I understand though. Yeah, you felt empowered, right? I mean, you had some new information. You had some ideas, and
man,
okay,
and so and So I started teaching and overloading everybody with information that I knew. And some people got better, but a lot of people didn't. And, and then the more I watched skilled teachers, because, Mike, again, he would let people struggle. That's something else that, it took me a long time to learn, that it's okay for them to mess up.
Right.
They got to kind of figure out where their boundaries are and then see if they can keep the intention directed in the right space.
That's right.
But again, I never saw any of that when I watched him. I just, understood the words he used and, all that he knew about all this stuff. Yeah. What is the cage-like thing that he developed?
Yeah. The Megza.
Yeah. That thing's brilliant.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Actually.
Dennis Sales uses it. My friend down in Texas. It's like awesome.
Well, I mean, there's there's another
constraints
coach. Yeah, right. I watch his students on how fast they get good.
Oh yeah.
And I think he's left-handed, and he taught himself to play right-handed.
Yep.
Yeah, and he can probably kick my ass.
I don't know. You underestimate you can still play. Your game is still good.
So yeah, like I said, I had all this information and whatnot, and being the science-driven guy that I was, I started, the search for the perfect swing. You start reading all the books,
yeah,
right, and then
that was one of the first ones you read.
That was an early one that I read.
Yeah, Golfing Machine.
Yeah, well, I didn't get into the Golfing Machine until later.
Okay, all right.
Like
I'm getting ahead of you.
That wasn't something that I picked up.
Okay.
Until like much later,
right.
Because I had watched Mike and I had watched Ronnie, and they did a lot of similar stuff, So I was like, no, this is like all the answers are like kind of like right here. And then Ronnie told me too. He's like, well, there's a lot of books about it. And read the book and read a lot of books. But that was one of the early ones that I read. Obviously read Jack's book and like Sneed, like all the players' books.
Players' books,
yeah. I read all those. The Tom Watson book. Ray Floyd's got like a short game book that I like love. I mean, I still teach a lot of that stuff that he talks about in there.
Sure.
But yeah, I just read a lot of stuff. And again, just got more and more information, and it seemed like that's what my lessons were, like information delivery. Like, man, I know all this stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell my guy for an hour.
I got you for like 35, 45 minutes, and you're gonna walk away and be like, man, that guy knows a lot of stuff.
But did they get any better, right?
Yeah, most of them different. Just I mean, being really bad at giving lessons when I started.
Yeah, we all did.
Right, and just started to pay more attention to. It took me a long time to pay more attention to the student. I'm ashamed to admit that, but
it's just part of the learning curve, man.
Yeah, it took me a long time to learn why they were there, not to listen to me spout off about all that I've read in the past year.
So where did you go from Kiowa?
I would say my big career break was I met this guy named Davis Cessna. And that was my big career break. He built this place in Avondale, Pennsylvania. And if you're familiar with Avondale, Pennsylvania, there's a distinct smell that goes along with that part of Pennsylvania. That's where like they grow all the mushrooms that you buy in the grocery store, it seems like. So yeah, you can imagine. I can taste it now just talking about it. That smell. And he started this club called Hartfeld, and it was a daily fee course, upscale daily fee, like country club for a day kind of atmosphere. And they did weddings there, so it was an awesome Tom Fazio golf course. Mr. Cessna is a visionary, so like the range was like way ahead of its time. All these crazy targets and changes in elevation and like fairway cuts, and you could literally, I mean, even though the target greens weren't maintained at green height, but you could literally walk out and play golf on the range.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was double-sided, and there was like a low side that was a wedge range that went up to like 115 yards. That was kind of back and private. I mean, again, like this guy, he's still kind of doing it wherever he goes. He brings his vision and makes every facility that he touches like a special place. So yeah, Davis, I hope you listen to this. But anyway, I met him, and there was a director of golf working there, and his name was Bill Jeremiah, and there was a director of instruction named Eric McLuhan, and Eric was running the golf school. And so I came, basically to work for Eric. And Eric was busy, but he wasn't slammed. And I was like, well, okay, well, if he's not slammed, I'm not going to be slammed. So I need to make sure this guy's slammed so I can get his runoff. And then I took a look at his programming, and it was good programming. Just he could have worded things better in his programming. So I was like, okay, Eric, I'm going to do this, this, and this. He's like, okay, great. And so I sat in there, I answered the phones, I did the marketing, and I made his book full. And then after that, like I said, I was like, oh no, Eric can't teach, but I have X, Y, and Z open, or we have this class if you want to come to that, and Eric will be teaching that class. So, and because Eric got successful, I got successful, and Eric was a great teacher. I mean, he was a phenomenal teacher. When I worked with him, he was the junior golf leader for the Philly section, and he's also won the teacher of the year in the Philly section. I don't know if it's more than once, but great teacher and super inspirational guy, and a guy that could like do anything with a golf ball, like with a golf club.
Great demonstrator, good player.
Yeah, like mind-blowing stuff. Yeah, and a pretty innovative guy too. Like he created this kind of interesting pulley system to help with transition. And he made it go outward, which I think was cool because that blew my mind when he showed me that. Like so from the top of the backswing. Right. Because, at that time, I didn't know what really was going on. And he's like, yeah, it goes that way first. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. But he's, so he knew stuff that, kind of they're figuring out now. But anyway, great teacher and kind individual. And like I said, because he was successful, I became successful. And in the Wilmington, Delaware, we'll just say the Delaware Valley area, like our junior golf program just exploded. And, he was sending kids to D1 school. And, so we'd kind of get them trained group wise, and then they go to him individually. And I can't remember how many girls in that time frame that I was there, which was like 96 to 99 in 3 years, how many girls he sent to D1 programs across the country. But it was a staggering number. And I learned a ton about everything. I learned a little bit about business. And again, to me, if I have a business skill, it's mostly understanding the relationship part of that business.
Which is good for our business for sure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of other skills that I really suck at. And, luckily where I currently am, I have a lot of talented people that help me do the stuff that I suck at.
That's important.
Yeah. Well, like being where I am now is awesome. But anyway, back to Hartfeld. I mean, that was just such a great place to be. And that's where kind of I understood that, the difference between like, just teaching a hobby golfer and teaching somebody who is like really interested in getting good, even though it still may be a hobby for them. But there's a big difference now in those two categories for me, where like when I first saw Bender, I was like, yeah, everybody's the same. And I was like, well, no. Yeah.
The commitment level is different.
Yeah. So, that's the big thing that I learned from Eric. But, and I also learned how to get, I'm going to say, just a little bit more organized. Good thing my wife's not listening because she'd be laughing right now because I'm not organized. I mean, this whole story that I'm telling is, as I'm, it's that's what I am. I'm just all over the place. was like, ooh, look at that squirrel. Oh, wow, check out that hawk. That's going to kill that squirrel. Oh my God, now that hawk's going to run into that car. It's just all over the place.
I get it.
Yeah. Scatterbrain, that Radiohead song. It's perfect for me.
All right, so where do we go from there? Then you get down south?
Yeah, so then because that junior golf program took off, there was the director of golf at the Wilmington Country Club, Mark Mongell. So like again, all these people, like they just, again, I'm just in the right place at the right time, right? I mean, Davis created this thing called Hartfeld, and Eric was at Hartfeld, and Bill Jeremiah was smart enough to point me in that direction from because Bill Jeremiah was at Pine Valley. But anyway, the Pine Valley thing's another episode,
right.
But so I'm just in the right place at the right time. That's kind of like how my life has worked so far, and I'm going to continue to ride that wave as long as I can. And so Mark Mongell, he calls me. He's like, hey, I'm going to come over to Hartfeld and have lunch. Can you join me on such and such a date? I'm like, yeah, sure. Because I was thinking, oh yeah, maybe director of instruction at Wilmington Country Club. He's coming over to talk to me. And I'm still pretty new in the business, but I'm getting connected. Mm-hmm. And I think that's another important part, and it seems like to me in
absolutely
the world. But so we have lunch, and he's like, hey, I just got offered this job to be the director of golf at this club in Atlanta, Georgia. It's called the Cherokee Town and Country Club. Have you ever heard of it? I'm like, no, never heard of it. And he's like, well, there's three kind of big country clubs in Atlanta. So there's the Atlanta Athletic Club. I was like, oh yeah, I heard of that one. He's like, Capital City Club. I'm like, no, I don't heard of that. And then Cherokee Town and Country Club. I'm like, okay, cool, And he's like, I want you to think about coming to work for me down there. He's like, you and Eric created something really unique here, and this club, even though it's private, right, it's huge. There's like 3,500 families that are members. It's a 36-hole facility. They have this huge town club in Buckhead. It's an amazing place. And he's like, so think about it. So he gets down there and gets settled in and gives me a call. And he's like, have you thought about it? He's like, yeah. So he's like, okay, well, come down and interview. And he's like, get your materials ready. I was like, my materials?
You thought you had it.
I was like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah. He's like, there's the golf committee's going to want to talk to you, and you need to present materials, and the governing board's going to want to meet you. So, I mean, I'm basically in the finals of the interview.
Mm-hmm.
But
you
I
skipped
didn't
a few
know,
steps.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't know I needed materials, and so like he clued me in and showed me what materials were, and then he really helped me kind of build that portfolio that you like to give everybody when you interview, mm-hmm. And so I had all the all the programs that I created, and the marketing and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. So
absolutely,
I don't need those details. But
yeah.
So, and he helped me get all that together. And so there's a whole new aspect. I was like, okay, well, this is a new side that, I don't really know. I've been at kind of like a resort with a private piece to it. And then I went to a golf club, and then I went to this upscale daily fee place. And now there's this like massive, really gorgeous private club, and I was like, do they really want a scatterbrain working for them?
And that happens to be our sister club at Carmel.
Yeah,
it's kind of cool, right?
Yeah, and Carmel had this you have this pro-am event that when I was at Cherokee, I mean, I always went up and played in it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so and I told my wife, and she's like, yeah, she's like I like it here. She's from South Carolina. She grew up in Colleton County. And then, after we got married, I drug her up to the Delaware Valley, and, she loved it there. And then I drug her to Atlanta, and I tried it when we first moved to Atlanta. I tried to get her to move into Grant Park area. And this was before Grant Park, I guess, went through its I don't know. Can I say gentrification? Is that a bad thing to say?
You just said it.
Okay. But anyway.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I get it.
So, but she was like, no, we don't need to live in the hood. Let's go to the suburbs. So we actually went into North Fulton County in this little town. Well, it's not a little town. This town called Roswell. And have you been to Roswell, Georgia?
I have not.
All right. It's a cool place. So if you go to Atlanta, take the trip up and go to Roswell. There's a lot of great restaurants on Canton Street. It's just it's a cool little place.
Is it as good as Asheville?
No, it's not. No, nothing's as good as Asheville's the best.
We had so much fun in Asheville. That was so cool.
Asheville's the best. And so I mean, I went to work for Mark Mongell at Cherokee County Country Club, and my job, I was assistant professional, but junior golf leader. That was my right. Is that what Seth kind of? Yeah,
that's Seth Myers.
Yeah, right. But Seth just teaches. I was also working a little bit in the golf shop, helping the head professional with stuff, and starting a junior golf program at this amazing place in the country clubs in Sandy Springs, Georgia, which is just outside the perimeter, set up in this bluff overlooking the Chattahoochee. I mean, it's, again, 36 holes, just was like, always in one of the courses is always in nice condition generally. It's a really nice place. And, so I was like, okay, all right, I got to build this junior program. And, the internet stuff was starting to work a little bit more, still no real social media and stuff like that. But, emailing and working with the moms, like I would go down to the town club and, they'd all be working out. And then, after they got done working out, they're hanging at the juice bar or whatever, I introduce myself, tell them what I'm going to do and tell them how I'd need their help and, were they willing to help me? So kind of getting the fairway moms on my side, if you will, because I know I'm going to need a lot of help. I can't wrangle that many kids by myself. And after I got about 10 volunteers, we started a junior program. In the first year, I think we had like 63 kids, and we'll say on a weekly basis, over 30. And, just doing like little clinical stuff and little, 30 minutes of this, 30 minutes of that. This was kind of new to me too, kind of just being only doing junior stuff and trying to make it a little more interesting than the environment that I was in last time, trying to think outside the box. And we had this awesome little short game area that Tom Fazio designed at Cherokee County Country Club. And, so it had 3 greens and each green had 3 different flag sticks. So I was like, okay, man, we just played 9 holes from just, green side and walked around and laughed and rolled up and down the hill. And, kids had a blast. The moms saw their kids having fun. And so, I think, what did I say, 63 the first year? And then next year it was like 300. It was crazy.
That is insane.
Yeah. It just like blew up. And, the director of golf is loving it because he's just a smart businessman. And, he figured out a way to make money off of everybody else making money.
Right.
It sounds like I'm bitter about that, doesn't it?
No.
So anyway, and it just exploded. And, so like other assistants getting involved and, it was awesome. And, some of the kids that came through that program, they started to get good. Some kids went to Georgia, some kids went to Georgia Tech, and they were playing golf in their, golf programs. So they turned out to be good golfers. And from there, the head pro got another job, and Mr. Mongell came to me and asked me if I wanted to be the head pro. And I was like, well, you kind of see where I like to go with this thing. He's like, well, let me tell you what I want you to do as my head pro. And being the the smart man that he was. There's, the golfing groups that form at these clubs that, they tend to be the board members and the golf and greens committee members. And you know how that works.
Oh yeah. It's like that at Carmel.
So,
sure.
Right. Yeah. So I basically, my job was kind of to play with these different golf groups and, listen and report back.
That's a pretty good gig.
Yeah. And, and because I was playing with them, then I started kind of teaching a lot of these guys. And the guy who ran the junior program after me, a guy named Ryan O'Mahony, who now teaches at Myers Park. I think he's the director of instruction at Myers Park. But plain truth guy, awesome guy. Mm-hmm. But so he's in the Carolina section now too, which is kind of cool for me, just to kind of see all the sphere of influence and how it can kind of end up in the same place sometimes.
Right.
But so he's like, that's kind of going to be the job. He's like, yeah, you're going to have to manage the payroll and schedule. And, he gave me all these like bullet points and whatnot. And I was like, well, what about the staff? And he's like, well, what about the staff? And I was like, well, does that make me in charge of, right, who the 4 assistants are? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, so I can hire and fire. And he's like, well, who are you going to fire? And I was like, well, I think you got some people who are low performers in there for you that, made Dave Barr, who was the previous head professional, made his job tough. Mm-hmm. And he's like, well, yeah, we'll talk about that. So, well, anyway, that we ended up with 2 new staff members and I hired them both. And all those bullet points that Mark gave me, I was confident that I could hand those off to them and they would kill it. And they did. And so, yeah, I was a head professional, but I really wasn't doing anything a head professional is supposed to do. I played golf with groups of members. So I played golf like 4 times a week, and then I taught like 2 days a week.
That's a pretty good job right there.
Yeah, no, it was an incredible job. And, from there, I made a career mistake. I went and became a director of golf at another club in the Atlanta area. Nice club, wonderful place. It was just not the right place for me to go. And, from there I ended up at the Cliffs, and that's where I am now. And I'm killing it, and I love it every day.
Yeah, it's such a great spot.
Yeah, well, and you only saw one of them.
I know, right? I mean, you have 7 golf courses?
Yeah. You only saw one of them. So next time you come, we'll do it at a different place.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll stay longer, and we'll do lots of cool stuff. But yeah, we had such a good time together, and I learned. I know we've talked a lot about your teaching style, and we'll kind of get into that because I think that's interesting as well. But let's talk about, because you've mentioned a lot of people that have sort of helped you along the way, and you kind of skipped over your big failure there, but we'll get to that later on. We can leave that out for now. But no, I always like to think back, like what advice would you give to your 25-year-old self in now, like this day and age, right? So, we're a little bit older. Like I said, when we were young, when we were in our 20s, the internet was just getting going. So the landscape has definitely changed for these young coaches. So if you were 25 right now, what advice would you give to yourself?
Oh man, good. When I was 25. Yeah, I don't know if I would want to be more directed than I was. I think that, was good for me at that time. But it would just be just like, if, whatever you do, just make sure you're giving it your best. I think that would be the, like, you're talking about social media. And I think James Hong, like, posted somewhere on something that, kids today think if they try, it means it gave it their best. And he's like, those are 2 different things. Or I'm paraphrasing, but it was, something to that effect. And that's definitely what I would say is like, it's okay to be like, you still there?
Yeah. So what's the difference? No, I didn't want to interrupt, but like, that's an interesting point. It's like the difference between trying and like really getting after it. Like, I mean,
that would be it. So, like I said, I was doing all these different things and, most of them were just for like pure enjoyment, like hedonistic, like I really like to do this, so I'm just gonna, do it. But I wasn't, if you're gonna be a professional, be a professional.
Right. Is that more like you think curiosity or?
Yeah, and just now they have drugs for it, and thankfully I don't take any of them. But it's that ADHD, like there's just everything could be like really interesting at times, and then sometimes because of the the hyper part, you can get hyper focused on something. Sure. Right. So, yeah.
So what would be your blueprint for young coaches nowadays? I mean, how do they get better and sort of figure out their path? Let's just say they've already assumed they're going to be.
There's just so much information. Route. Yeah. There's so much information for them to digest. How do you discern? I mean, like, how do you know what to listen to, what not to listen to, or do you listen to it all? Like, I kind of listened to everything and then sort of picked and chose and tried, and a lot of trial and error and a lot of effing people up and then figuring out what doesn't work. Yeah. And, obviously experiment on yourself first before
That's very good. Yes.
Or find somebody who's like just as interested and curious as you are, and you guys can, experiment together. But make sure, like, okay, if you understand the physics of it and it's sound and, it makes sense, okay, we'll run it through your program and then run it through somebody else's program, and then you can start trying it on the masses. But yeah, for young coaches, I would say all the classification systems and all that stuff that's out there, I think it's important for them they probably need to know it because it's out there, and it's better that you know it because your student may know it too. So if they're coming to you with questions about stuff, it's nice for you to be able to answer them.
For sure.
And then there's, like I said, there's so many of them out there. When we were doing it, right, we were watching like VHS tapes.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I watched Martin Hall like give so many lessons on VHS tapes that I got from somebody else that I learned how to draw lines and use video, and then that's like so archaic now.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's.
But that's all we had.
It's crazy. But it's awesome, and now, I mean, now with everything that we know with 3D, and but like what Michael Jacobs is doing, and Dr. Nesbitt, what those two guys are doing together, and the model that they're creating, or I guess their convention that they're using, I mean, it's awesome. Yeah. I mean, the way you can see golf swings now, it's awesome. All these AMM, I mean, and now like that's like the dinosaur, right?
Yeah.
Now they have these like remote system. What Gears does. I mean, to have. If I had a Gear studio, I'd probably never leave it.
Yeah.
And that would be bad for like my students, but because again, I would just I want to know everything about this thing and
trying everything
know how
out.
it works. Right. Yeah. But
yeah, Tyler Farrell's a good point to give it like a shout out. He's doing a cert course now. Actually, I just signed up for. So I'm still trying to learn more about the 3D stuff, which I'm excited about learning from Tyler because I think he's really, really smart in that area and in fitness, like you. Yeah. Like you're so good with how the body moves, and
that guy is, Tyler's amazing. Yeah. So, and I guess my first 3D conversations were on the phone, and this was like, I don't know, it seems like forever ago, but I don't know, I'm gonna say like 2000. I want to say like 2007, 2008, Ryan Chaney. He was like my first back and forth talking 3D.
Yeah, he's like, really good at wrist graphs and understanding it.
And because we were talking about all these like joint movements and everything, and I was just having a good time because I could talk about joint movements and somebody wasn't looking at me like I had a third eye. So that was the best part about it for me. It's like, all right, man, this guy's just as interested in this stuff as I am. But theorizing with him and understanding things with him, and I feel like I'm part of his trail army. I understand like trail arm camp, like what he likes to see, his preferences for trail arm stuff.
Yeah, me too. I'm really digging into that. It's so fascinating. and learning from Tyler and John Sinclair about the different camera angles, and then matching that up with actually what's happening with 3D. And the truth is interesting.
Your workshop is, it was the haven to go hang out for the day and just hang around like-minded people, and to learn from like John Sinclair and Kirk Aguri and all those guys, and that like just know like everything about everything.
Right.
Really good problem solvers, and they're not scatterbrained. They're just like solving the problem.
For sure.
But yeah. I mean, for young coaches, wow, that's like there's just so much out there. The ground reaction stuff. I mean, how amazing is that?
Yeah, for sure. I'm using Body Track and learning. I learn something every time I use it. And talking to like guys like Mark Blackburn and Chris Como and those guys that are way smarter than me, it's just like you just figure things out and you test it and you get better.
Yeah, I mean, so back to the blueprint. Yeah, I mean, digest stuff. When you have questions, find somebody who's smarter than you, and hopefully they can give you an answer that helps you understand it. Or, maybe there's things you're not supposed to understand anyway, and then you just move on. Maybe if you can't understand it, it's not something you want to teach. Right.
Yeah, I mean that's where we talk about the IQ versus the EQ stuff, and that's where I think you're so great is the EQ. We talked about the billing relationships and just you see it, especially like when we're teaching golf schools together. It's not so much about the IQ. Like we don't use a lot of really deep verbiage with the average golfers, right? We're trying to get them to trust us.
Years ago, I would have, like 25-year-old me would have. I know all this stuff. I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, but I mean, so much more this weekend when we were teaching together was just getting them to like buy into some simple ideas of this is how you're going to improve your game with the commitment level that you have and how much time you have to practice, and like how can we improve your experience as a golfer the quickest.
Yeah. Well, and I know Mr. Dockendorf. I mean, he's definitely going to want you to come back.
Well, the lady that thought I spent a little too much time with him, maybe.
Yeah. That's possible.
But it's just.
But yeah. Like I said, there's there's a lot of systems out there, and then once you start to understand the systems and the classifications in the systems, you start to realize that, well, they're really not that different,
Exactly.
There's a lot of similarities in a lot of the systems, at least a lot of the systems that I've looked into, and if you're looking for like good digestible content, with the athletic motion golf guys was Mike Granato and Sean Webb.
Yeah.
I mean, but there's just another example. I mean, but again, just wonderfully put together. We were talking about movies before, right? Right. Yeah. They create awesome content.
The presentation, right? I mean, it's just that how you present the information is important.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I don't really have a blueprint for young coaches, because if I was a young coach now, I'd be like frightened as shit because there's so much stuff out there.
Right. To get overwhelmed for sure.
Right. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit.
When I'm teaching the teachers at the Cliffs, if you will, I mean, to give an example.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. It's just sometimes it's fun just to talk theory with them and show them how the theory can kind of help them solve problems. It's not necessarily that they need to know what's going on and whatnot, but if and all I'm talking about is like simple physics stuff, you're just talking about, the center mass of the club and the net force that's coming out of your body through the hands, and, how those things influence each other and how they create shapes and stuff like that.
Right.
If they can get better at kind of seeing that stuff and how it works, they can solve problems faster.
Yeah. How's the club working?
Right.
Yeah. And then you dive into how's the body working and then how that affects the club, right?
Yeah, right. But my catchphrase is, the the player moves the club and the club moves the player. There's this,
Yep.
duality play going on between those two components. And, there's a time element, and there's, kind of like a space element too. So it's for the true geek in me who still likes to understand theoretical physics and like that kind of stuff. That's where I love the golf swing, because, what a beautiful representation of not only the Cartesian coordinates, but, some other, we'll say, more esoteric elements.
Yeah, for sure. That's where it's interesting to me, because I think we first talked about it last year at our little section teaching summit, and we had the round table, and we were talking about how do we start with players, and being as technical as we both can be. I thought it was really cool how you try to get your players on the golf course as soon as possible. And what I learned this week is, we talked about constraints and creating different environments for our players, is how you do that, and then the different games that you provide for those situations. Talk to me a little bit about, and the listeners I think will be really interested in this, is how did that come about for you? Because it's so non-technical, right? I mean, I think there's got to be a blend. We talked about that a little bit this week.
Yeah,
it's like, there's a time to teach technique, right? But then there's also like, okay, how do we get it to the golf course if that's not happening? The skill isn't being transferred. We got to dive into that and start to get more golf course related. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. And, and again, just that, moving away from, I got certified in the golfing machine and, tried to learn stack and tilt, because Mike and Andy were at Aronimink when I was in the Philly section. So, again, try to learn a lot of stuff and, use a lot of pieces from, a lot of those things that I learned. And, I was like, man, I can get my player to hit it good on the range. I can get them to hit these shots in these practice environments, and then they shoot 83. Like, why do my players suck? What am I missing? And then somebody told me, he's like, well, do you watch them go play in a tournament or go play? I was like, no. And he's like, you don't? What the hell's wrong with you? I was like, nothing. I thought I was doing what I was supposed to, the old hour model, turning them over. And so, I knew I had a good player. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go watch this kid play in a tournament. And I watched him play in a tournament, and I'm watching all the stuff that he's doing. And I was like, well, this is weird. I mean, it's not what we practice. His routine's different. He hits a couple bad shots, and he's like dropping F-bombs and throwing stuff. And, I was like, okay, this is interesting. So, he gets done, and, I asked him, I was like, he's, what's the deal? I'm a little confused. And he's like, well, what are you confused about? He was really pissed off, and, I was like hitting him, every time I'm around you, I'm hitting it great. And I was like, well, here's the deal. When have I watched you go play golf? Or when have I asked you to do something on a golf course? And he's like, well, never. And he's like, but you asked me to hit this shot in the short game area, I can hit it. You asked me to hit, I was like, well, don't you think maybe that's possibly affecting this? And he's like, well, what do you mean? It's like just a golf shot. And I was like, well, I thought the same thing, but apparently it's not, because your behavior's not even the same when you're out here. And
did he get upset or frustrated, like when he hit a bad shot when you were giving him a private lesson, like on the range?
Yeah, he was frustrated.
So there was some of that.
And maybe it was because I was standing right next to, that he wasn't dropping F-bombs and throwing clubs, because I wasn't going to tolerate that. And he knew that. Sure. But he also knew I was there watching him in that tournament. And, he just really struggled, couldn't get anything on the club face. It was, and then I'm feeling bad for him. Then, so, we have this conversation, and it just occurred to me, it's like, okay, well, I need to move this kid out on the golf course, or when I'm creating a practice environment, there needs to be some kind of consequence for this kid. What each shot has Lennon PSA. What is that? Every shot has a purpose. That book.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, just that may be a better teacher. So I learned to create better environments. Consequence is a big deal. I guess the thing that I've learned the most is that context for you actually learning something, the context of that skill is probably the biggest deal of all.
So when did that flip for you? Like when did you start getting heavier into playing and setting up golf lessons on the course? Obviously, you gotta have the space. I mean, for me, it's not as feasible just because of my environment at the club. But I try to do more of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of being where I am is kind of what helped me move into what I would say just more of teaching golf, because it was like you were saying, I like to get them on the course as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this grandfather and these two grandsons, and they were coming in from California, and neither of them had played golf. He told me about their athletic background. They're both musical, and so you got some talent, right? So they play instruments and they play soccer and basketball, and so they and he's a grandpa, so maybe he's got a bias or whatever. But then you meet the kids, and he's like, "Well, what are you gonna do with them first?" I was like, "Oh, we're gonna go play golf." He's like, "Well, they don't know how to play golf." I was like, "Well, I'm gonna explain it to them so they know what to do. So if I ask them to practice something, they understand why it's important for them to practice." And he's like, "Holy shit! I wish somebody would have started me there." I was like, "Yeah, because you got on the driving range, right? And it was frustrating."
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah." And there's no real context to what you're trying to achieve.
They didn't have a goal of why they were doing what they were doing.
Right.
Makes sense.
So yeah, we went out there and we played 3 holes, and I said, okay, so this is right. These are kind of the pieces of the game. So driving's a pretty important piece, right? Let's can we practice driving? And they're like, yeah, man, I want to get better at it. Okay, cool. So they were kind of into it once they had the real idea, what they were supposed to do, and how hard, it was obviously very challenging for them, because I didn't tell them how to hold the club. I was like, okay, this is what you do. You start here, you're going to take this thing and whack it down there. Zero. I gave them no instruction at all.
Really?
And none. Right. But they were athletes, they got the idea.
Yeah.
They got the idea of what they were supposed to do with it, and, they didn't whiff it. So again, you got talent, right? But they just realized, it's like, man, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Like the older one, for sure, who was much more intellectual, while the younger one was just much more, I'm just going to overcome everything just by sheer will.
Yes.
Kind of an individual.
Sure.
And so we got done, and because that's what I told the grandfather. He's like, how long is it going to take? And I was like, well, I went 3 hours with them. And he's like, well, it seems like a long time. Got a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, and they never got bored. They were totally into it. And so I don't know if I know I still got the letter that the grandfather wrote me, because now those 2 kids love golf. That's
right.
Basically what it boils down to. They don't get to play when they go back in California very much, but whenever they come, so it's him and his 2 grandsons, and they're playing golf, and he's loving it.
That's what it's all about, right?
No, he's loving it. So I started getting off the hour method, and I started, going to it. Usually if you have my first appointment, I asked that is 2 hours, and you're going to warm up. I'm going to watch you warm up, and you're going to go play golf. And either I'm going to play with you, or I'm just going to observe you. Kind of depends on the individual.
Sure.
Because sometimes if I don't play, like the player gets so weirded out by the observer that they don't perform like they normally would if you were just kind of doing your thing.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So it kind of depends on the individual. And, so I have a lot of long-term clients now, where basically our lessons are, they come, they warm up, because now they know how to warm up. I've shown them how I think they should warm up.
I like your warm-up routine too, by the way.
And then we go play golf, and either we're gaming the game of golf inside of, so we're, making it harder than it really is. I've shared a lot of those games with Robbie, Robbie Fails.
Mm-hmm.
So we either do that, or we just play golf, and we gamble a lot when we play.
Yeah, you put constraints. Like I like what we did with our group is you got the example of, all right, you can't hit it down this side of the fairway. If that happens, then there's a penalty or you owe me money.
yeah. So yeah, depending on the right and the skill set of the player, and I'm lucky actually. I mean, that I do still get the opportunity to interact with elite level golfers, but mostly on a regular basis, right? It's just like hobby golfers, and
right.
But they these people have kind of bought into it, and the nice thing is like they're winning their club championship. They're winning their Saturday games a lot. And, people ask him, is like, well, I know you take these like long lessons with Sean, like every 2 weeks, like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah. Well,
and they tell him, he's like, nothing really. We play golf, and, he creates challenges for me on the golf course. And,
right.
Most of the time I fail at those challenges miserably, but it seems like when I come out here with you guys, I'm okay.
You're making practice a little harder than their normal game then, right? I mean, that's part of it.
Golf is obviously very challenging, but I try to figure out whatever the skill set that I got with. Okay, well, I'm gonna push them where they don't like to be.
Sure. Yeah, I like that. It's similar to what James Rudyard talked about in his clinics, where he's trying to make them uncomfortable to really show them where they're at their weakest.
Yeah. Like Mike Bender called that he called it like finding your blind spot.
Sure.
Like, so when you're like figuring out a technique or whatever, like push it to its edges on either side and figure out kind of where it doesn't work.
So at what point there's got to be obviously some technical changes that have to happen. I mean, Mr. Dickendorf, we couldn't have taken him on the golf course and had any fun because he was topping it. You know what I mean? Like at that point, you're like, there's got to be a decision made where we need to go build some skills. And then let's go test it on the golf course. Would you agree with that?
No, 100%. Yeah. And, I like how you kind of mentioned, like, that's, when I'm defining the difference between skill building and what that environment is and what you should be doing there versus playing golf. Yeah. I think they're different mindsets a little bit. Yeah.
It's how do we get those closer together, right?
Right. Like if I take a brand new golfer out there, right? And so that brand new golfer, you're like, she may hit a tee shot or he may hit a tee shot, and then we may pick up the ball and go to green side.
Right. Like we did with our group, our beginning group.
Let them kind of figure out that experience a little bit, because, and maybe do that for 2 or 3 holes. And then you can kind of come in and start, here's where you want to be. Here's where you are. Like, here's a pathway to get there. Mm-hmm. So let's start with this particular piece of it and, get going. And then, hey man, in about 10 days, 15 days, I'll see you again. And we're going to still kind of work on the skill building pieces. We may go out and play a hole,
right? But
it might be the hole where you just hit the drive and then go knock it in from 25 yards away or something like that.
Yeah, it's such a good blend. I mean, I think it's such a great way to learn golf, and I applaud you for that. It's opened my eyes to say, all right, I need to do more of that. Even though I've got that mindset, but it's so easy for us as coaches to just kind of like sit there and give normal golf lessons of technique and ball striking and whatever it is, putting or chipping, and go, all right, assume that they have it and not really test it on the golf course.
Yeah, and I remember in one of your workshops, like the one that Cameron McCormick was speaking at,
mm-hmm.
and he talked about those ideas, right? Ways to make skills transfer, and
yes.
Like hearing him say those 2 words, like I'd never even thought of that, like ever in my life. I don't think. And I was kind of doing something like that, or I started doing something like that experimentally. But then, I do what I usually do when somebody like Cameron speaks and you're like, okay, well, that guy is the shit. I want to be like that guy.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. So thankfully there's the internet now. And I just read a whole bunch of stuff. There's 2 guys. One guy, Peter Arnaud.
Yeah.
Do you know who that? Yeah.
I do.
I mean, right. But not only is, the guy I think he's a great writer for sure. And, but also, I mean, I've learned like kind of how his ideas work. And I would say I'm doing something similar, but now that I kind of, his are backed more by science. Mine were just like kind of backed by my gut. And, so you used a lot of things that he does for sure.
Yeah. 'Cause that's where the constraints came in, right?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. And Graham McDowell's the other guy that.
Yep. That's right. We
Right.
talked about that last year, and I looked him up, and I'm like, yeah, this is some good stuff.
Yeah.
Really good. Makes sense.
And you know, the way that they kind of like design their practice is, I've definitely latched on to their concepts big time for sure. Because I think that there's a way to shrink the knowing and doing gap, because you got to know that's the right place to start, right? Kind of knowing what to do and how to do it, but then being able to actually do it and do it when you want to do it
under pressure, or whether it's in front of your friends or in a tournament, depending on the level. There's no doubt.
Right. Because I don't know if it's impossible. I think it's impossible to escape those emotions. You're going to be fearful and anxious and feel like, want to throw up.
Yep.
I think that's just what humans do when
just normal
situations arise. Right. Sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So we talked about when we're going to do this face to face, we're going to have some questions. So sort of a Q&A for both of us, but especially for you, I think, because most of these are from Robbie, Curious George, aka Curious George, that we would ask just for the audience. So let's dive into a couple of these, and then we'll finish off with, my few rapid fire questions that I like to ask. All right. So the first one is, how might you go about helping people find their correct foot placement? I think this is an interesting question because I'm a big fan of foot flare, but you can tell me, I think we talked a little bit about this actually in one of our teaching summits we were together at too, but foot placement's effect on dynamic stability and ways to test each individual. I know I was going to say that I like the way you test
dynamic stability.
Yeah. So you did your little stretching exercises with the students, which sort of was masked by AKA screens.
Yeah.
I thought that was brilliant, because it's like, they feel kind of weird getting on the floor doing a normal screen, but when you say, oh, we're just going to stretch and you're observing, I think that was brilliant. So how would you, let's say, foot placement, and then how does that affect dynamic stability? And I've got another question that sort of piggybacks on that. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Everything's a big deal on the golf swing. I'm definitely a kind of a foot freak when it comes to the golf swing, like the foot and the ankle. And so, there's so many, it depends.
Sure.
Like, that go with that. But yeah,
give us some examples of like sort of certain placements will do what and affect what on the body or the golf swing.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say most of the people that I work with at the Cliffs, right? So successful, but they're part of that sitting culture. Mm-hmm. So the ability for them to open their hips and their torsos, it's hard for them. So a lot of those players, right, I will pull their lead ankle back out of the way. I will open them up, basically. So I'll kind of pre-open their pelvis.
Okay.
Because I know they're not going to be able to open it dynamically. And so, I mean, that's a way that I can help control that player's low point better, and also, stabilize their club face a lot.
How does that affect the backstroke, though? Is that going to inhibit the?
Yeah, it usually shortens it, which I generally don't have a problem with if I can get them to flush it more.
Gotcha.
And they don't usually generally have a problem with it too, because most of these guys anyway, there's not even a ton of separation between the pelvis and the thorax.
Sure.
I'm cheating a little bit, but that's all I'm trying to do. And then we'll say, obviously too, foot placement. It's a path effector, I think.
Sure.
I think it's a path effector.
What about the space between the feet? Would you get the heels closer for that individual that can't move? or is that going to help him to rotate a little bit easier?
So if I kind of did my job when I was having them stretch, I'd have also a good idea, like, can they load their lead leg? So if they can't, I might get their feet closer together. If they can load their lead leg, I might cheat even more and get them preloaded.
With pressure. You're talking about
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I.e. or Mr. Dickendorf.
Yeah.
Right?
Perfect
exactly
example. What you did for Mr. Dockendorf, right?
Dockendorf, yeah.
Right. I mean, not a ton of mobility, zero separation. Right.
Yep.
I mean, none.
Yeah.
Right. Zero separation. So yeah, at the top, he felt like he was loaded up over his lead leg.
Mm-hmm.
And he went from not being able to find the ground to like flushing it.
Sure. So how concerned, this is the second part of it, how concerned are you with the excessive inversion of the lead foot in the follow through? And he put, i.e. Jordan Spieth. Now, I was actually talking to a student the other day about this. It was like, my left foot seems to want to move. And I'm like, it kind of has to, or you're going to roll it really bad. But Jordan looks like his ankle's going to break.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Jordan, he's got a great team. I'm sure he's training for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a normal human being, I would be pretty concerned about it.
Right. You'd flare it out a little bit more, maybe, or
right. I mean, this guy's a top level athlete. Yeah, I'd flare it out about a little. Obviously, I'd be concerned. Is like, well, is there something that's causing that?
Sure.
First of all, but if you gotta, I mean, you've taught like the big guy with the hard down drive, right? And
mm-hmm.
if his front foot doesn't spin, he's gonna snap his ankle.
Right. Yeah. So I'll let them move it. I mean, it's either open it up more or let them keep moving it like Patrick Reed or Bubba or whatever.
Let it kind of spin.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you're not too concerned with that, as long as they can have some stability.
Well, I mean, if the guy was rolling hard like Jordan does, if it was a normal human being, that I would, right? I would probably pay more attention to, I would probably back him off, and I would make him do some other stuff with his foot and his ankle. Because I would just want to test it more, because I just want to know what it's capable of.
It's one of the drills that I give a lot of my players that tend to either, we call it early extend, or they push their pelvis towards the ball, or the right hip sort of drives towards the golf ball with the right knee and coming off the right. I used to. I'll flare that right foot a lot. I actually saw Scott Calx when he was teaching, when he was here a few weeks ago. He did that with Matt Hughes. Is there?
Yeah. So, right.
There's something to. How does that work? I mean, I know there's obviously there's. I'm not going to give him to hit the ball from there. I mean, you play from there, but I think it's a good way to sort of restrict the right hip.
Well, so like you're driving all that external rotation, and like presetting joint alignment. So I guess this is what Robbie's real question kind of sounds like it is. Yeah, yes. You setup's a big deal, right? The way you line your joints up. Have you ever heard the word centration?
No,
like joint centration. Well, so again,
centerness of like the joints being over top of another joint. Kind of, sort of. No?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily, but okay. I mean, there's like a definite geometry to it, and
gotcha.
It works up and down the chain, and affects everything else. But yeah, I mean, so if you think about it, right? So what have you done to that trail foot, right? It's flared all the way out. So you've externally rotated kind of everything.
Sure.
So now something's in a position and it hasn't even moved yet. Right. So now you're going to kind of wind up and it's going to turn a little bit more.
Yep.
But when it's coming back down, at some point, it's like, okay, well, no, you placed me here. You don't want me to do much from this position. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a nice way for players to feel that, that transition.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like like sometimes when I like watch it on gears and I'm watching like the bones thing, it looks like the pelvis kind of like floats like for a second. I mean, it's not that long, but that's kind of what it looks like to me.
Right.
When like, you know, their lead leg is kind of twisting itself into the ground and they're like falling back to the other side.
All right, the next one is.
Did I answer the question?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's
talking in a circle there.
No, it's good. I mean, I think it's just sort of promoting conversation of why that works and then how that could be dangerous, obviously, and that's why I would not have them go full speed.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Usually
right.
when I give my kids, obviously usually it's kids because I don't want to break somebody's knee or ankle, as I'll tell them I want it 3/4 and we're going to do like punch shots. Yeah, but just to give them an idea of what it should feel like, where they should have their pressure, other than the ball of their right foot and where the knee's working, it's just going to give them a sort of that sensation of something different.
Yeah, like the pressure's moving deeper into the foot.
Exactly, yeah, more in the back of the foot, more in the lead heel or whatever it is we're trying to get. Drills, I'm just looking through this list here. Drills to promote unweighting in transition. This is a good one, yeah. So, in talking to Scott Calix, that's been kind of these questions stem from, I think, because I was thinking of the lumberjack and the axe, chopping the wood, and I've been teaching this a lot for a while, and not probably even known why or sort of the science behind it, but just as they start in transition where they feel like basically the hips push back and the chest I want the chest going closer to the ground or squatting. And I would say, if you were getting ready to do a deadlift, what would you do, right? Where you're gonna make that sort of look and feel, and that's I've explained to them that's pushing into the ground as they can start to rotate and then jump back up later. Is there any drills that you have for that?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I got a couple. I got shuffle style drills for sure. Like my main starting one for the long hang backers. Mm-hmm. So they get their lead arm parallel to the ground in their backswing, and then they pick up their lead foot and finish their backswing and swing through. I mean, it's kind of
like a step drill.
Yeah. But
okay.
Yeah, I try not to have them stride very much.
Right. Just got to pick it up and put it back down.
Right. And like the people who the people who love to early extend do that. It's just funny. Like early extension, it used to be called something different when I was young. It wasn't called early extension.
We call it humping the ball.
Yeah. Humping the goat.
Humping the goat.
That's the first one.
I understand. Yeah. I got it.
But so I'll do the same thing. And you were talking about like joint placement. Yeah. I'll have them pull their lead leg back and point their foot more at the target, make them swing more left.
Yeah.
And also get that feel that you were talking about, that kind of like fall into the ground.
Yes. Unweighting.
Feel. Yes. Yeah. There's I can't remember the name of the book, but I know the author, Erica Larkin. She has like these.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of books, these 5 phases of the golf swing. And like, I love her transition phase description.
It's sad to say I haven't read her book. She's a good friend of mine. It's bad.
No, it's an awesome book.
Yeah, she's a great teacher.
Yeah. She's on it.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
For sure.
All right, so let's see. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I love those. I love a bunch of different shuffle drills because it kind of depends for the student. I think like where I try to make them shuffle. Mm-hmm. Like some people you can get your hands over your shoe and stop and pick your foot up and put it down.
Right.
Because they just don't want to go over there. So you got to get them to do it like in their mind, like right away. And they still don't, but at least they think they are.
Those are great to do. I do those mostly on body track too, because you can see where like the vertical force starts to spike and then where the pressure shift starts to move.
I got to get some more tech. I'm not a.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm surprised you don't have body track. That'd be good for you. But yeah, it's just an easy way to kind of measure. All right, this is where it's happening. It needs to happen sooner or later.
Right.
I get guys that actually should. Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I'll put the iPad right in front of them.
I mean, that's
and they can actually practice without a ball and see exactly where the center of pressure is moving. And
then they're teaching themselves, and that's the best place.
That's exactly right. So it kind of it gives them to do it wrong, do it right. That deep practice that we talked about a little bit, I'm huge on, which is what Daniel Coy started.
For me, I love that stuff. Yeah.
All right, so one more, because I think this was kind of interesting. How would you design a task for someone to help them achieve a good lead wrist sequence?
I would use Robbie Fale's method of the impact snap.
Wow. Okay. Explain that.
The impact snap has the design, right?
Yep.
And then,
I know what you're talking about. I just want you to explain it to the listeners.
Yeah, I mean, so I know he has it in his content somewhere. So
yeah, it's on his Instagram.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, but he figured out a way, right? Brilliant kid. That okay, well, hey, I can kind of work a little bit of the supination, pronation stuff in there, along with the flexion, extension, ulnar deviation stuff. Mm-hmm. So I mean, he added another degree of freedom to the tool, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's better than the way it's designed, actually.
I have to agree. Okay. No, it's awesome.
All right, well, everybody will have to go find Rob Fale's golf.
And like immediately, like you kind of like people figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like instead of like the other way when they're snapping it down a lot to make it work. Yeah, no, you figure out a way to make the lead wrist work. I mean, what I do is, I usually get the hands for the player just a lot closer to the club head, and like kind of put the club head on their left side, and so I'm kind of molding in pivot and hand path and plane kind of like all together. But then they have a better connection to the club face.
Sure.
That's I stole that from Mike Bender, so thanks, Mike.
For sure. All right, that was great. All right, so a couple of my rapid fire questions here, and I'll let you go. I know you're still hanging at the club. I'll get you home to your wife. So the overwhelmed question I think is always important because we're all busy and we get stressed out. I mean, what do you do when you feel overwhelmed and unfocused? And like, what is there something you tell yourself, or is there any tactics that you use?
I use yoga a lot for that. I wouldn't say meditating, but just going through the breathing practices and posing is good enough generally for me. That's kind of my thing. You're
a pretty chill guy, though. I don't feel like you ever get that stressed out.
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, I get I create problems that don't exist. That's
we all do.
Right.
I'm a big worrier, and I'm
exactly
trying to work on that, and usually it's not that important, and you figure how stupid are you to let that get you that worked up.
Right. That's like Dr. something Carlson, like don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's those are great little things, but I mean, it's just mostly yoga and breathing, and just kind of just basic mindfulness practice. That's all. It's you just. I don't know. You just kind of sit and realize it's like, okay, well, this really isn't that significant. Just like you said, it's not that big a deal.
Right.
So, even if it is a big deal, like you get fired or something, ultimately it's not really.
Right. You always can find something else.
Yeah.
What was let's get back to that failure question real quick. So describe a failure or a roadblock in your career that has set you up for later success.
Yeah. So, like I said, I had been fortunate in my career that I've been places and gotten into this teaching thing and was doing a lot of teaching, and it was great. I loved it. I was getting better at it. I mean, I was getting, we'll say, even better players asking me for help with like certain things with the games, and I think that's a huge compliment when somebody who's already pretty skilled and is they're asking you for your opinion with their game. I think that's you know, that's I guess one of the things that kind of keeps me going. But I took this job in golf administration, and I did it for money. And it was, I lasted a fair amount of time. Luckily, the last general manager that came through, he was a PGA guy, and he was, extremely forthright, honest, and upfront with everything. And so the situation that happened, it happened, and my next job, I didn't get back into golf administration.
Yeah, you looked at that mistake and you said, all right, obviously I'm miserable. I mean, it's very similar to my story, as we talked about. It's like I tried the head pro gig for a few years and found out that was definitely not where I wanted to be. And you pivot and you move on. Yeah.
And, I thought I thought I could be that guy. And once I was that guy, I was like, man, I'm not very good at being this guy. And luckily for me, at least, like when I kind of got my team in place and everything,
sure,
it was good. It was a good experience. It was a good experience once I got the right players in there. And, one of those guys is a guy, too, a guy named Sean Coach.
Yes. Just met him last year.
Yeah,
great guy. Yeah. Great teacher.
He became my director of instruction. So, yeah. And he's still there doing it, and he's killing it, and he's awesome.
Yeah.
You should have a conversation with him one day.
I think I'm going to have him on the show. How about that?
All right. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. What purchase of $100 or less in the last 5 years has affected your life the most?
Like that I mean, I got a crappy guitar that I bought for like $85. So
okay. You play it?
Yeah. Well, it's nice because, I can kind of hang it out in the regular room. So like, dogs, my wife and I are into animal rescue. So we have a lot of critters at our house.
Yeah. So
that one can just kind of hang out there, and it's fine if a cat pees on it or something. It's like not a big deal.
Okay. That's definitely a different answer. I like it. If you had to get a message to billions of people and put it on a billboard, metaphorically speaking, what would it be and why?
So there's this movie that Tina Fey made. What is it? Yankee something. Did you see the film?
I'm sure I have. I'm not. The name's anyway. I'm misplaced the name.
But regardless of that, but a character in the film, like she's like in a war reporter, and she comes back and gets back in touch with one of the soldiers. He'd lost a limb, and he's got PTSD, and things are strange with his wife. It's just, and he says, he's like, you just got to embrace the suck, and that would go on my billboard for sure.
I like it,
right? Because that is, that's it. That's a lot of times things that are happening around you, they suck.
Is it great news?
And if you embrace it, your perspective on the suck can maybe change.
I like it. I'm anal about this stuff, so I'm looking on IMDb right now. Is it great news? Is that the movie?
No.
Wait, hold on. She's a war reporter?
Yeah, like Yankee Foxtrot. No, that's Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. That's like a Wilco record. Yankee something.
Oh my gosh.
It's got like call letters.
Tina Fey from Saturday Night Live?
Yeah.
God, what's it not showing up? Hold on. This is going to bug me now.
Yeah. Well, maybe I don't have the title right, because you got to remember I'm a scatterbrain. So
I understand that. You're very smart scatterbrain, though, by the way. Good Lord.
But that's my billboard.
I like that. Embrace the suck. That's awesome, man.
Well, and as far as like learning anything new, you kind of, if you don't have that attitude, it's going to be a real challenge. It's already going to be a challenge, but if you don't have that attitude, it's going to be a real challenge.
Right, especially like our students trying to learn golf. You got to get them to understand that the learning process and how it's not easy, and to have some patience. Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I mean, our general clientele can not necessarily display that virtue at times.
Exactly. Oh man, well, dude, this has been awesome.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh my gosh, this is
it was
fantastic.
fun just like to ramble like that.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it's not, that's the way I love to do this show, because this is how I learn, and this is, it's pretty much all about me right now. Nobody's paying me to do this, right? So I'm just excited to spend time with guys smarter than me, like yourself, that I can learn from and build relationships, and we're going to spend a lot more time together in the future. Tell the listeners how they can reach out to you and say thank you. Give them your social media.
Yeah, I'm Shawnee Pure PGA, and it's not spelled like my name. SHAWNEEPURE, and then PGA on Twitter, and Instagram is just Shawnee Pure.
That's great, man. Well,
and that's going to be my Skype handle now too.
Yeah, exactly. Now that you have Skype. Beautiful, man. Well, thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me on, Jason. And again, thanks for coming up and doing that school with me. That was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to the next time we get to hang out on the deck together.
Absolutely. All right, brother. I will talk to you soon.
All right. Cheers, man.
Yeah. What's up, y'all? Guru back here again with a couple of things before you jump off. First off, big thank you to Sean Kennedy for coming on the show. Such a great guy and a super talented teacher that I think you're going to hear a lot from in the near future. So big thank you for him for sharing his story and a lot of great coaching and teaching information, as well as some life lessons there that were weaved in if you paid attention. Tweet me your biggest takeaway from Sean and my conversation, as you can reach me on Twitter at Golf Guru TV and on Instagram at Golf Guru TV as well. You can reach Sean at Shawnee Pure on Instagram and Twitter. So reach out to him and say thank you. But tell me, what do you think? Great conversation. We could have gone on for a couple of hours, I think. And thank you for so much for hanging in there for the almost 2-hour conversation there. I think it would have been even longer if we would have done it over a couple of beers when we were together this weekend. So I'm pretty sure we'll have him on the show again. You can reach out to me as well at golfgurushow@gmail.com if you have a question or want me to answer your question on #Guru Friday. This show and all episodes of the Golf Guru Show were produced by myself, Jason Sutton. Music is by Zach Mullet, aka Cutta Beats. Leave me an iTunes review or a rating. Let me know how I'm doing. Always trying to get better. Always trying to improve. Always open for suggestions. So I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you sharing. And I appreciate you supporting the podcast. And as I always leave with you, the mantra from my mentor, Jim Rohn: study, practice, teach, and then pass it on. I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening.